One more year. That's the promise of Algerian authorities. Approve a fifth term for the ailing Abdelaziz Bouteflika and we'll find a suitable replacement within 12 months. The world was stunned by these images of a partially paralyzed Bouteflika literally wheeled out to vote in the last presidential election back in 2014. Who'd have thought that 5 years later, the 82-year-old would be the only name the ruling caste of political leaders and generals could agree upon? This time, citizens are out in the streets. Algerians who long thought best to stay out of politics after the blood years of the 90s and early 2000s are voicing their outrage. So far, they've managed to do it peacefully. Where will the movement go now? What reaction to the government's promise of a transition year? Moreover, can a youthful oil and gas-rich nation of 42 million turn the page on the past, not just the blood years that started with political Islam's thwarted attempt to win by the ballot box, but also that symbiotic love-hate relationship with former colonial power France and the outsized role of Algeria's military? We've often reflected on Algeria's past, but what does its future look like? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking if we're witnessing an Algerian awakening. And joining us from Algiers, sociologist Amel Boubekeur, research fellow at the École Normale Supérieure, the French School of Higher Learning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also in the Algerian capital, Mébarck Malek Serrai, former economic advisor to President Bouteflika. Welcome to the show.
Serrai, thank you very much.
Yassine Mami is member of Gilles Jadid, New Generation Opposition Party, which is not taking part in next month's election. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And Madjid Messaoudene, municipal councillor in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis, watching it very closely, and like so many, a French citizen of Algerian heritage. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. He may be in a hospital in Switzerland, but Abdelaziz Bouteflika has indeed submitted his candidacy for a fifth term ahead of that Sunday night deadline. The news greeted by fresh protests in several cities. Owen Barnell has more.
A new week begins, and the protests rumble on. Demonstrators took to the streets once more in Algeria, students leading the march through Guelma in the country's northeast. Monday's protests follow on from a night of unrest, as hundreds condemn Abdelaziz Bouteflika's announcement that he will run in April's elections, and that if re-elected, step down within a year before another round of fresh elections.
Yesterday, we understood that the government is a joke. Even our constitution has become a scenario for a Bollywood film. He would like to stay another year, and after that he'll see. He'll leave power. It's a masquerade. It's not a democracy or even a republic. It is not democratic. It's a kingdom.
No one in their right mind would accept a disabled man as president. It's impossible. A mafia is in power, and we're supposed to accept it? No, it's impossible. It's ridiculous.
The announcement was not given by Bouteflika himself. The 82-year-old has rarely been seen in public since he had a stroke in 2013 and was in Switzerland receiving medical care over the weekend. Instead, it was the president's campaign chief who formally submitted his candidacy and promised a raft of measures from a new constitution to tackling poverty and youth unemployment. The president's announcements are an attempt to quell the biggest protest movement the country has seen for 20 years. Tens of thousands have taken to the streets, insisting the president is no longer fit to lead and that his administration is rife with corruption. Nearly 70% of Algerians are under 30, and 1 out of every 4 young people is out of work.
Amel Boubekeur, first of all, did you see these protests coming?
Yeah, I believe they are the result of a long story, and the tentative of Bouteflika to run for a fifth mandate has definitely killed any chance that the regime will reform itself. It has also killed some of the regime's main narratives. Those are narratives that have been built, actually, since 1962, in order to marginalize Algerians from the official political life. So, for example, what was offered to Algerians were only fake elections, fake political parties, and the deal was either you accept it or you remain outside of any kind of political life. Well, what happened for these past 2 terms is that Algerians got used to live without a president. They got used to live without a state. And they finally thought, well, we can do it by ourselves. We can invent our own way forward. And that's the result, actually, of this situation. There was also a narrative that was kind of taboo, and that was preventing Algerians to join the streets and to join official political life and to form official political demands. Of course, as you mentioned, it was the fear of the civil war, but not in the way we traditionally understand it. Not because they were afraid, not because they were afraid that terrorism will come back. It's because the regime made them guilty, saying, well, it's because you disagreed at some point with each other that we had a civil war. So if you ever disagree again, then this is a danger for the stability of the country. But with these protests, they have proved that whatever their ideologies are, they may go in solidarity, in unity in the streets and formulate specific political demands of change.
All right, you mentioned there, Amel, how the Algerians are used to being governed without a president. We're going to listen to Algeria's ambassador to France, who earlier in the day insisted that Bouteflika is still the man who calls the shots.
He said it himself when he announced his intention to rerun. He does have health issues. Of course, he isn't as fit as before, but his mind is as sharp as a 20-year-old's.
He still has the mind of a 20-year-old. Malek Serrai, can we honestly believe that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, good afternoon. First of all, I will correct, I was advisor to the President Serrai and not Bouteflika.
Excuse me.
I was also the United Nations. So when we know that the Algerian population is very young, 75% less than 35 years, this is very difficult hour for Algeria now. And the big mistake of Bouteflika is the last 5 years. He was totally absent of governing the Algeria, and everybody was thinking what's going on now, what about Algeria, since this long absence, 5 years. Now, what she said, the lady, she is right. No one is wondering about what will going to happen unless we go to change the rule and regulation and we change all the team, because our problem with the team is bureaucracy, is regionalism, is corruption, very strong corruption now. It's happened around the administration. That's why everybody wants to change, not only the president because he's old. In fact, people are talking about the sickness of the president and not the president itself. We must make the difference. But for the regime, according to what's going on, no one accepted the situation. That's why I'm wondering what's going on after tomorrow, and even next Friday, when all the ladies will come out on Friday, on the 8th March. I think they will reconsider many things. What happened? Even if he proposed that the national conferences on how to find the new way to correct the situation in Algeria, but who will participate to this conference? Who will take the decision? Who will apply the decision? What means we need for this conference to be concretely within the people? Because now no one will understand and no one will wait, because we are waiting more than 5 years of silence. The situation is very, very difficult. I am wondering, and then these young people, you know that he gives us lesson with his intelligence, his education, you know, is going on the situation. It's all the world now knows that we have very young people capable to change the things, capable to take in charge many functions of the management of this big country.
Right, let me bring in Yassine Mami on this point, because it's an important one that was just brought up there by Malek Serrai, which is 5 years ago, people kind of accepted that, all right, it's Bouteflika this time, but we're going to sort it out. He had a stroke in 2013. It's unpleasant to see a man being wheeled in on election day to vote, but we'll figure out why is it that they haven't agreed on a successor, and why is it that, and is there any guarantee that an extra year will change any of that?
So I agree with my colleagues Amel and Malek. You know, in Algeria there is more than 70% are young, or 75 are young. The Algerian people do not understand what why we have why the biggest country in Africa is managed by very old and very sick president. As said by Malek, the problem is not only the president, by the team around the president. We need a very dynamic.
Why can't they agree amongst themselves on the name of a successor?
Because there is different teams in the power between the president, his brother, some businessmen. Sorry.
The army and
the army, yes, and the army, of course, and they didn't succeed to have one person and one name to succeed to Bouteflika.
Will the protest change that, Madjid Messaoudene?
I hope so, and to be honest, I've been waiting for that for almost 20 years, more or less, because each year when I go to Algeria, when I see how the country is managed, the public services that are devastated, when I see that each year the Algerian president go outside to care himself, meanwhile the Algerian people has to deal with health public service devastated. I was waiting.
Yeah, because back in 2011, and Amel Boubekeur was with us when the Arab Spring began. At the very beginning of the Arab Spring, there were a few protests in Algeria.
We don't have the same history, and I think that 10 years ago and 20 years ago, people were very afraid of this back of terrorism and Islamism. But today, as many people here said, the population of Algeria is very young, and they didn't face that directly. And the blackmail between chaos or Islamism doesn't work anymore. And I think that, as Amel Boubekeur said just before, there's a third voice. And the third voice is the voice of the people. And I think that they are doing something we have never seen big demonstrations as we see today. The Algerian people has not taken to the street so heavily. So I am very optimistic. And I think that what did, not Bouteflika, because we know he did not write any letter, and we know that we don't even know if he's alive or not. But it is a lack of respect because they put someone to the presidency, someone we have not been able to see publicly for years, and nobody can accept that.
Amel Boubekeur, tell us who we've been reading. Amel, we've been reading these reports.
Please, 1 minute.
Sure, Malek Serrai, very quickly.
Yeah, would you allow me, please, 1 minute? Since at least 12 years, we were saying through radio, newspaper, foreigner, and Algeria that Algeria need a revolution. I mean, cultural revolution, soft revolution to change the mind, to change the way of management. But no one could listen to us. We were few experts, few professors of the university, and sometimes we received pressure, but they didn't touch us because all the world knows about us, what we are doing. But we were saying since 12 years that Algeria need cultural revolution to change all this kind of management, to change also 80% of the team who is not capable, is very old team and corrupted. This is not a new one. But now definitely, since the young people come up, we are very happy that these young people come up and follow what we were saying since 12 years.
All right, let me bring in Amel Boubekeur on this,
Yes.
because Amel, in the demonstrations, we've been reading press reports about how people have been bringing plastic bags to clean up the rubbish. That it's been very peaceful.
Yes.
Tell us, Amel Boubekeur,
Excellent.
who has been out there protesting? What kind of people have been out in the streets?
You know, these people are not disconnected from the history of their country. They are the product of it, paradoxically. First, the official propaganda that has sacralized revolution, revolutionaries, shuhada, martyrs, and so on, have created in their hearts the feeling and the belief that they are also revolutionaries and that they can make it as well, that they are inheritors of this history. So this is a very strong feeling among the ranks of the protesters. We have done so once against France, and we can repeat it again. We won't be defeated this time. So there's also two important feelings and two important unsolved issues currently among the ranks of the protesters. There is the issue of repression. So people have really tried to, and I have seen it, to control the issue of repression. They have tried to sympathize with the police. They have shout slogans that are explaining that the army is also the chef. They are also the sons of the people. They have tried to also control any kind of clashes with the police, even if we had some manipulation and at the end of the protest, and especially last week, they have tried very quickly to control this protest. So there's a strong feeling of self-control and strong need of self-control. The second unsolved issue is about the leadership. I have been asked numerous times, especially from international media, about the lack of the leadership in this movement. I think first, on the side of the regime, that's not a problem. On the contrary, they don't want to see a leadership emerging from these protests and within the ranks of the demonstrators. But at the same time, there's also a new culture of, well, we don't need actually a leadership. What we need are clear and transparent institutions. That's what they are asking for. They are not asking for a new miracle candidate that will come and providential and non-providential, how we say it in French, that will come and reform everything, and that will all Algerians will walk behind him. No, what they are asking are much more transparent institutions, the end of the corruption, and more social justice. So this is a culture that is already evolving, actually, even if the regime has shown that they are totally disconnected and they have not evolved on their side, still promising reforms and transitions and ad vitam aeternam. But within the ranks of the protesters, there's new ideas and new feelings that need to be analyzed.
All right, so it's more than just against a fifth term for Bouteflika. The demands run deeper. When we come back, we're going to look at what those other demands can be and whether it can be a leaderless movement for now. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're reflecting on the biggest protests Algeria has seen in years. With us to talk about it against this movement that began with the announcement that the wheelchair-bound, ailing 82-year-old President Abdelaziz Bouteflika would be running for a fifth term next year. Amel Boubekeur, who's a research fellow at France's École Normale Supérieure, joins us from Algiers, as does Malek Serrai, former economic advisor to former President Lamine Zeroual, Yassine Mami, member of Gilles Jadid, the New Generation Party, and Madjid Messaoudene, municipal councillor in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis. We're asking why in 5 years they have not been able to agree on the name of a replacement within the ruling party for Abdelaziz Bouteflika. And it brings us to the way Algeria's power system works. Egyptians speak of the deep state. Algerians in French talk of le système, the system. In Arabic, enadam, which means the regime, a regime that can't seem to come up with a consensus candidate. Adel Gastel and Sylvie Rothman have the story.
Algeria's president has been ailing. He's now seldom seen in public. Abdelaziz Bouteflika took office in 1999, following 10 years of civil war and atrocities. Algeria then stabilized, helped by vast oil and gas reserves and a bullish market. The government subsidized young entrepreneurs, one of Bouteflika's key achievements during his second term. But in 2008, he pushed a constitutional change to lift term limits and win a third election. In 2013, he had a stroke. Critics and observers then questioned his ability to rule the country. He nonetheless ran for a fourth term 1 year later and won again, aged 77. But is he really in charge of the country? Very quickly, the president's brother, Saïd Bouteflika, gained influence as his advisor, and rapid changes took place in the military. The powerful head of intelligence retired, high-ranking officer nicknamed Tufik. The new head of intelligence answers directly to the presidency. General Ahmed Gaid Salah is the chief of staff of the armed forces. Another center of power lies with the national oil and gas company, Sonatrach. It collects the proceeds of Algeria's reserves and is the backbone of the economy. Other major players include business leaders whose companies have won major public contracts. Ali Haddad chairs a forum of top executives. Local media describe him as close to the president's brother. Political Islam no longer holds as much sway as it did in the 1990s. While the opposition is weak, young people take to football stadiums and social networks to vent their frustrations.
And we've had many reactions on the hashtag F24 debate, including this one from Dina. Isn't it amazing? Bouteflika in 2014, I will initiate constitutional change and hand the torch to the youth. 5 years later, same rhetoric, doomed to fail. However, this time, Algeria wants not only his departure, but a genuine regime change. Okay, several important questions here, Yassine Mami. First of all, the rallying cry that everyone agrees upon is no to a fifth term. It's even a hashtag, right?
Yes.
Beyond that, people can interpret what the people in the streets want. You heard Amel Boubekeur saying they want an end to systemic corruption. What, for you, is, beyond that rallying cry, is it become difficult for everyone to agree in the streets of Algiers or in other big cities, including your native Oran? Will the movement work as long as it's that one rallying cry, no to a fifth term, or can it go further?
Honestly, I don't know if the situation is because of the president or his brother or the army. As political party, we call to this team to leave the Algeria and give to Algeria a chance to go to the development and progress.
Which brings the second question: can it be a leaderless movement, or would you like to see leaders emerge? Perhaps even the leader of your party.
Yes, in my party, Gilles Jadid, Jidal Soufiane, we will not participate to this election because we consider that it's not a free election and not transparent election. Maybe if in next month, in few months, we can organize, we can enter in a transition phase, and we can organize.
Does the movement, though, that's out in the streets right now need a leader, is my question.
Yes. Yes, maybe yes.
Madjid Messaoudene, you agree?
I don't think this movement needs a leader. I think that what you said is very important. Beyond the no to the fifth mandate, they want to get rid of this system, of the regime, of the way that Algeria is managed since 1962 by the army, by the public business companies, and by the secret services. And this is like a mafia, which is organized just to deal with all the rents from the hydrocarbons that are very important in Algeria. And I think that the youth, especially the youth, has nothing to lose now. I think that you said it, more than 70% of the population is less than 30 years. So they have nothing to lose, and they want their future back. And they don't want this regime to tell them what is better for them, because we've seen Algeria managed by the same people since the liberation. And we have not got rid of colonization to have a mafia inside the country that take the resources and don't give them back to the population. So I don't think that this movement needs a leader. First, they have to get rid of the system, They have to bring a new institution, maybe a new constitution, maybe a new regime. And after that, leaders will emerge. But the more important for me is the project. What do we want for Algeria? Because as a French and as an Algerian, I'm very concerned about what's going on there. And I'm really optimistic because, as I said just before, I was waiting for that for many years now.
So, Amel Boubekeur, the ambitions of our panelists go beyond saying no. Just 1 minute. Just first to Amel Boubekeur. The ambitions of our panelists go beyond saying no to a fifth mandate. Does it mean, though, that it can stay peaceful, that at one point the regime may feel threatened and that there will be violence?
I think we often forget about one crucial element in the regime's stability and capability to maintain itself. Its position on the international scene. We're talking about Algeria as if it's only a face-à-face between the people and the Algerian regime. Well, it's more than that. You know that after in the 2000s, Algeria became, also thanks to the US, the champion of the anti-terrorism struggle. That's legitimacy that they have used on the international scene. We know how to defeat terrorism, and we will explain that to you, especially after September 11. This legitimacy tends to fade now because the Algerian regime, of course, the configuration of the international scene has changed first. And second, Algeria has finally not been able to answer another concern of the European Union and the US, because, you know, they only have two ways to think about Algeria, either through the terrorism lens or the anti-immigration policies. And Algeria has failed, actually, because of this lack of real politics and real policies and real vision for the country to answer its partners' demand, its international partners' demand. That's something that I believe makes them very vulnerable now. That's one thing. The second thing is that, as the previous commenter mentioned Algerians took the streets also in France, but also in Canada, also in Switzerland, elsewhere. So this is not only a question is related to Algeria itself. These countries who have supported Algeria for so long and have put the legitimacy of multi-party elections ahead will have to renew also the way they approach their support to the regime. And I believe the regime knows it. I mean, their interests and their money are outside. They are not in Algeria. And their children are outside. Their economic interests are outside. So the fact that it is now also an international issue will certainly have a huge impact on how the regime will negotiate a way out.
All right, Malek, Serrai, on that point, let me read to you the communique from the French Foreign Ministry. We have taken act of the candidacy of President Bouteflika. We hope that the presidential election will take place in good conditions. It's up to the Algerian people to choose its leaders and to decide its future. Rather bland statement. Is that the best Paris could have come up with?
I think taking into account the very strong relation between France and Algeria, this declaration is the good one. We cannot make another declaration out of this frontier, let's say. Because, first of all, let's come back again. Now, actually, the president is prisoner of 3 or 4 groups, very strong group, taking control of the banks, transfer of the money, taking the control of the land. They are taking land everywhere in Algeria, very, very large land for them. And they don't permit anyone to interfere. That's why they are working to keep the situation as it is. But from the other side, the young people, they don't give advantage to the political party, because these parties are not working regularly. They are very weak. That's why maybe some few leaders will come these days from the basically no one will know them, from the social associations, and France, as one of our best and our nearest, partner, will do its best to let the movement to go slowly and safely, because it's very strong, very difficult situation. I think we must say one day thanks to France to help us to take this change without too much, problems. The problem is, we think the people that are staying around the presidency, if France closed the door to this kind of corrupted people and unclean people, that maybe it will help all the movement actually of the Algerian young people, and also all the movement of all this people who are knowing the situation but don't say many things because they are wondering about the position of the army. Even the army itself, since we need to change the things without, big problems, that I hope we will say thanks to France and thanks to this declaration. Even us here inside, we are looking what's going on. We are calling X and I and saying, please be careful, go slow, because these people, these young people, if you touch them, if unfortunately the army, maybe of the police, or for the timing they are very quiet, and if you touch them, then no one will control, even with the help of France.
All right,
be
so
careful
better
about it.
to proceed. Better to proceed.
We cannot allow. In fact, excuse me. We cannot allow 200 to 300 people around the presidency who are taking the money of the country to bring us to very bad situation of this very big country. We know that also the cooperation, international cooperation, to make pressure about this.
All right, so it's better to proceed. Malek Serrai saying better to proceed with caution.
Yes.
Madjid Messaoudene, you agree?
I have one fear. I'm going back to what you said just before. I think that by now the police was not that violent, because we have seen the police, the Algerian police, violent against doctors that were demonstrating in Algiers, and the repression was very huge. And I think that if this movement lasts a few days or few weeks, and if the regime feels threatened, I think that it will use force against demonstrators, and will take into account that, and we'll look at the French reaction, because the French government will not have any choice, and he will have to condemn the violence against demonstrators. And we will see if France really wants the Algerian population to take his future into account.
Yeah, it really brings us back again to that symbiotic relationship between France and Algeria. There was a brutal war of independence which was hard fought for Algeria. In fact, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, he sort of personifies Algeria's history in a way. He'd been in that very first government after independence in 1962. There you see him later as that picture when he was foreign minister, and you see Kurt Waldheim, then the UN Secretary General, standing next to the Algerian president. That was in the 1970s. Bouteflika served in the 1970s. Part of Algeria's history has been in relation to France. Yassine Mami, you heard Madjid Messaoudene saying people are going to be watching carefully what Paris does if it does become violent.
Yes, of course. France is the first partner of Algeria, economic partner, but also it's give support to this regime. The regime cannot exist without the support of France and other countries. I can tell to France President Macron that we have to look at the Tunisian experience and to don't make some mistakes as France that made with the Tunisian crisis.
Which are?
To don't support the people and support the regime in place.
Oh, at the beginning, when
Yes.
the French Interior Minister offered support for riot police. Amel Boubekeur, the relationship with France, will it matter in this, or are we beyond all of that? Is this really just a problem between Algerians?
Well, what is for sure is that the regime has damaged the image of France within the people. I mean, in the ranks of the demonstrators, you can say slogans like, you could hear slogans like "La défense, we are going to get you out." So, Sons of France, we are going to get you out. It's the direct result of the regime's duplicity with France and its perceived support among the Algerians. And I have to say that, you know, having the clans, the war of clans narrative, it is of no interest to the protesters and to Algerians at large. They don't care who is leading Algeria. They don't care who is more important than the other. But it is important for France. I mean, not having a clear figure that can take, again, pragmatic and understandable decisions is something that is more of an handicap for France than a liability. So this is something that we have to think when we think about the relationship of Algeria to France. The feeling of the people that is the direct result of the regime, and that in this case is not of France's favor. And at the same time, on the other hand, the relationship that France, or the kind of regime that France is willing to have in Algeria. And I believe that it's not the kind of regime they want to have, even if they are still talking about the elections as an element of change. I think that's because they have no alternative. But that's something, again, that is not relevant for the Algerian. They don't want another elections right now. That's not what they want.
What do they want then? Beyond what you were saying earlier, this fight against corruption, you heard Madjid Messaoudene say they want a complete wholesale cleaning of the system, Amel.
Yeah, I think the core element will be the role of the army. I think that the army, at a point or another, which remains silent, by the way, will have to allow demonstrations to go peacefully. They will have to say, okay, we do accept that demonstrations can take place, and they will take place peacefully without the creation of a state of emergency, without you fearing. Yesterday, when people took the streets in the night in Algiers and in other cities of the country, people on their social networks were afraid that this will be the opportunity for the army to install a new state of emergency. So the fear of the army, much more than the fear of the regime or Bouteflika as such, is very present in the heart of the Algerians. So the army will have to decide if they want to have a peaceful transition or not, and they won't be able to remain silent anymore, especially in the next weeks, and especially as Bouteflika is not such an important speaker or a commentator of the situation right now.
Yeah, Madjid Messaoudene, social media is, of course, once again, I'm stating the obvious here, but a huge factor in all of this. We've seen the demonstrators filming themselves at every
the Algerian population is very young, so very connected. And it's very, and for me...
I was going to ask you, have you been glued to your timeline?
Of course. And I have followed many Algerian journalists or French correspondents there, like RFI, for example, and I take many images and many things coming from there, and I have many family there, so I'm calling them to see how things are going there. But I'm really sure of something. I think it's gonna last. I don't know how many time, but it will last, because what happened yesterday is like a robbery. A robbery, yeah. And I think that the Algerian people is not ready to accept that once again. And I think it will last. I don't know how many time, but I'm really, I really fear that the army and the police will go in the street to put an end to the demonstration. And I'm really, really concerned about that.
All right, we're going to continue, of course, to follow Madjid Messaoudene. I want to thank you. I want to thank Yassine Mami. I want to thank Malek, Serrai, and Amel Boubekeur for joining us from Algiers. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Simon Harding, who's been following it for us.
Good evening, François. Good evening, everyone. I'm having a particular look on how the day's events, and everything's been portrayed in the media, whether it be local media, François, or media internationally. I'd just like to start off with this cartoon, which is in the Liberté Algérie, and it's by famous cartoonist, Algerian cartoonist Diem, which is saying l'élection présidentielle est jouée d'avance, which translated in English means the election has already been played out. The result is already there, and you see, I'm just going to scroll down just a little bit, and you can see here the little arrow, the asterisk, which is represented the people president of the Republic. So a big shout out there to the fact that it is the people who are winning this battle.
Two key buzzwords, le système, the system, and on the other hand, le peuple, the people.
Exactly. And there really is this idea that it is the people who are coming out on top against President Bouteflika. If we move on to El Watan, which is of course the biggest French-speaking paper in Algeria, we can see again thousands of students contesting Bouteflika's candidature, his presidential bid, and Bouteflika, however, defies Algerians. He continues to do what he thinks is right. So we can see the paper here, it's the cartoon. It's again very provocative in the way it's designed, very provocative in what it's hinting, and of course the armed policemen there, who you can see incredibly armoured, you know, with the batons, the shields, almost looking a bit like Robocops in this cartoon. We then move on to El Mujahid, which is a more conciliatory tone, and it is a pro-government paper. And here what we're seeing is that it's simply outlining what the president has offered to do to the people.
It's 6 pledges.
Exactly, but it doesn't mention the riots, the protests, sorry. It doesn't mention what's going on in the country. It's just a very factual piece on the front page about the president. Something which is also echoed in L'Expression, which again, it's a very neutral line outlining the facts surrounding the president, but omitting any news, and importantly so, news of the protests, whether it be students, whether it be women, of course, who've been very present across Algeria, making their opinions heard so far. We move on to one of the Arabic most important newspapers there, which is El Kabar, which, however, says that Bouteflika is ignoring the protests against his fifth term and that he has chosen not to respond to the people's demands. And again, so you can see these two very contrasting images of the press in Algeria and as they take position against or for the president. We move on, of course, to the international press, and France 24 is one of the most followed international channels in Algeria. This is the Arabic page, which does headline on those protests, particularly from students. We have the English channel, which has a more in-depth piece on the president, from peacemaker to ailing recluse, once again talking about his medical situation. Is he actually still able, fit to lead the country, and how it happens? And of course, we finish here with the New York Times. President's offer fails to temper outrage, so still focusing very much on the situation, which is very tense in Algeria.
All right, many thanks, Simon Harding, for that look at Algeria's thriving press and the different opinions there. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.